Okay, so we're going to pick up Reconstruction Part 2. I'm going to talk quickly here about Southern Republican governments. So after radical Republicans had gained control of Reconstruction in the mid-1860s, let's say late 1867, and they're making southern states reform, pass the 14th Amendment and guarantee black suffrage, and they're going to disqualify all of the former Confederate leaders and so on and so forth. And what we get is basically a brief period of Republican rule in the South at the state level. And these governments are very revolutionary. For the first time, African Americans had real political power. A whole bunch were elected to local office. At the state level, there's more than 600 elected, and 14 African Americans are going to serve in Congress. And this Thomas Nast cartoon from 1847 shows the three primary groups that initially were the leaders of the South's African American communities. These governments are going to embark on a very ambitious series of reforms. They're going to build public schools. They're going to rebuild a lot of the infrastructure that was destroyed during the Civil War. They're also going to spend money expanding industry, orphanages, hospitals, etc. There's a downside to this. The downside, there's two parts to it. One is the practical cost. These Reconstruction Republican governments spent money. They're unpopular with a lot of Southern whites, and obviously they need to spend money and get that money from somewhere, and they get that by raising taxes. Some of these governments are also corrupt. Next unit we'll be talking about the United States after the Civil War, 1865 to 1900, and that time period is called the Gilded Age, and that is a time period of general corruption in American political life, and southern states during this time were no exception. So there was a lot of corruption. Unfortunately, what kind of became ingrained in a lot of Southerners' way of thinking was that because these governments were being run by the Republicans, because there was a lot of African American participation, that was the reason for the corruption, which obviously is not the answer. The fact was there was corruption, but it was like any other corruption in the time period, and the southern states weren't exempt from it. But Reconstruction in the late 1800s became something that Southerners saw as being foisted upon them by Northern whites, and it was a terribly bad time for the South, where black Republicans squeezed them of every cent and ruled them mercilessly. And if you wonder about that, just watch something like Gone with the Wind, and you'll get the idea. Some Southern whites are going to grow frustrated, and what we begin to see are the growth of secret terrorist, we would call them terrorist groups, secret societies. The most obvious example would be the Ku Klux Klan, which is born in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1866. And in the 1870s, these terror groups basically go on the rampage in the South. And their goal is to intimidate, through any means necessary, Republican voters, white and black, in the South, in order to drive out the Republican Party from the South. And what we begin to see is slowly but surely, state after state in the South sees this kind of terror activity, and the Republican Party eventually kind of caves in, and the Democrats reclaim the state. And this is called redeeming the South. And in class, or if you are doing this on Google Classroom, now is the time to open the source, the KKK source. And you can see on the map that this is the Military Reconstruction Act, and you can see that each state has two dates. The first date is when they were readmitted into the Union after accepting the 14th Amendment and guaranteeing black suffrage. The second date is the date when the Republican Reconstruction government was defeated. And you can see that for some states it was pretty early. Tennessee, probably not a surprise, the birthplace of the KKK, the Republicans were gone from that state by 1869. And here are some visuals from the time period. Thomas Nast is our main cartoonist for this time period. And you can see a lot of symbolism in that cartoon. And basically you have there a couple of different white supremacist groups cooperating to make sure that the changes in the South are purely cosmetic. In the background you can see someone who's been lynched. You can also see a burning schoolhouse. There's a reference there to the Confederate cause, the lost cause. And some other images of the time. The image on the right would have been kind of a typical kind of American's view of what was going on in the South. And you can see "Let us have peace." That was actually Ulysses S. Grant's campaign slogan in the 1870s. The federal government is at first going to react very vigorously. In 1871, the federal government passes a group of acts that we call the Enforcement Acts. This is the federal government stepping in and ensuring that southern states are guaranteeing the right to vote, sending supervisors to supervise elections, and also the passage of the KKK Act, which gave the government broad powers to root out the KKK in certain states, for example, South Carolina. This is successful in the early 1870s. The problem is it has to. You have to keep on doing it. The federal government had to keep doing this. It's kind of like, I don't know, going to the gym. You may go to the gym and you may be successful and you may work out and do all that, but if you stop going to the gym, then you're going to lose the fitness and you're going to lose the health gains of going to the gym. In 1873, something very symbolic happens. There is a huge economic panic. One of the first things we'll do next unit is to talk about railroads. And this economic panic saw several prominent railroads collapse, and this was a financial panic. And this is almost like a dividing line. A lot of people in the country felt that Reconstruction was something that should be over, and that Americans needed to focus on other things, particularly the economy. Ulysses S. Grant is elected in 1872. The problem is his second term is beset by scandals, and as a result, Grant is he has to please a group of Republicans called the Liberal Republicans, and they are all for focusing on the economy and not and leaving the South alone, basically. And so the fact that Grant has to kind of cater to these Republicans is seen in the 1872 Amnesty Act, which basically forgives all of the former Confederates and allows them to vote and hold political power. Couple Grant's problems with scandals, having to cater to the liberal Republicans and the economic panic of 1873, and it's really not a surprise that state by state gradually fell to the Democratic Party in the early and mid 1870s. In 1876, we're going to have a very strange election. Grant has kind of worn out his welcome. The Liberal Republicans have chosen a candidate called Rutherford B. Hayes. The Democratic candidate is Samuel Tilden. It's clear that the Republicans have kind of are pretty much done with the South. Neither candidate really says too much about the racial issues that have been going on, the reign of terror of the KKK. And we get this strange election where it's really, really close. In 3 southern states, there's a lot of allegations of voter fraud. And as a result, both sides claim victory in these states. And the 3 states were South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. And it's very unclear as to what exactly happened. Depending on what you read, it does seem that these states would have gone Democratic, although, and that would have given Samuel Tilden the victory. Whether they would have gone Democratic fairly, I think, is another point completely. What we have is a constitutional crisis where for several months the winner of the election is unclear. Both sides claim victory. The Republicans claim victory. The Democrats claim victory. Ultimately, a deal is struck. In return for giving all of the 3 disputed states to the Republicans, which gives them the presidency, the Republicans agree to withdraw troops from the South, and that basically gives the Democrats control of the South again. And so every southern state is now controlled by a Democratic government. So let me just recap the 1876 election. This is called the Compromise of 1877. The 3 disputed states, South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana, they're given to the Republicans, so the Republicans win the presidency, they regain the presidency, they keep the presidency. The flip side is that now all of the Republican state governments have gone. All of the troops are gone from the South. There's nothing now to stop southern state governments kind of gradually restricting their former slaves' rights, and that's exactly what happens over the next couple of decades in the South as the era of Jim Crow slowly begins to develop.